Welcome to this South Burlington School Board meeting. And I would point out we have our board chair, Rich Cassidy, on the phone, who's going to try to listen in and participate. And I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Are there any comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to agenda item number 4. And David, could I ask for an update on the status of the Howard Center's permit to open the methadone clinic?
Sure. At the last board meeting, a decision was made to file with the environmental court. That currently is in play. We have 30 days from the time in which the DRB made its decision to submit our paperwork to the environmental court. So that will be occurring. That's currently where we stand at the present time. And again, just wanting to make sure people are informed of the board's next intention. So again, that's all I have at the moment. There's no additional details at the present time. It will remain on the agenda, just so that we can continue to keep the public informed.
Great.
And I had a question I did want to raise with respect to Howard Center, and I think it's probably as good a place as any. I've heard from a number of people in the community who have questioned the fact that the school district contracts with Howard Center for a lot of different services. And generally, my questioning whether we should continue to do that. And generally, my response has been that they provide very important services. They're different parts of Howard Center, but I think we owe the community more than just that. And I would like to see a little more of a rundown of how the school district is using Howard Center, and I would hope that we could see it when we have the next update at the next meeting, or at least have the information available at that time.
Sure.
So do we have consensus, then we'll direct David to provide some input as to the kinds of services the Howard Center's providing. Great. All right, and the bulk of the meeting this evening, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, and we'll start the public hearing and on the 2014 budget.
So I'll just begin and then give you a little bit of an update on where things are. But as you know, at the last meeting, I presented the recommended budget to the board, and the information and implications were attached. At the present time, that's what's before the board. There was some direction from the board around looking at some additional closer looks in some areas, specifically looking at Chamberlain. Some of the higher class numbers was requested to be looked at. What I provided you was information in front of you about the options that I see might exist for you to consider. Again, I continue to stand behind what I think is an appropriate budget that allows us to continue to move forward in meeting our ends. Yes, I understand that it has some areas of what I would say upper threshold limits, but again, it gets very difficult when we add things back in or choices are made, and how that becomes equitably dispersed. Again, the administrators and myself have worked hard to do some of these things to get us where we are today at the 2.16% increase. So again, I provided you what I think you wanted, and that was, again, options. And Holly Ruel, I asked to assist me with kind of the pros and the cons associated with some of those options. The public doesn't have those options in front of them at this moment, but it is staying right where we are. It was adding a full-time teacher, adding a part-time teacher, and adding a paraeducator to support the needs. Those were the options that weighed out, and again, information was provided to you. We're ready to be able to, if there's no additional changes, we're ready to be able to look at the information and the resulting factor. We need to obviously sign the warning so that it can begin to be published and communicated to the public as we move forward, leading up to the March 5th town meeting. If the board so desires to make changes up or down, we're able to do that. John Stewart unfortunately is sick tonight, so we'll probably need to we'll need to confer with him a little bit on making sure our public warning accuracy is right. So we may need to adjourn briefly if there is a change, if there's a change needed to what we've presented. So with that, I will stop and entertain any questions that you wish.
Well, let me just explore the issue of adding back an elementary school teacher. First of all, I understand that the recommendation still is to not add that position back, correct? I just want to understand.
Again, my recommendation that I presented to the board was at the recommended budget. What you asked me to do was to come back with providing you some options. Holly obviously has done what I've asked her to do, to look at other options. I've obviously worked with her on looking at what those other options are. You may see there's additional ones than what I've cited. I looked at other ones with Holly as well, but they were far less cost effective than even adding a teacher. So, again, I want to allow you to have that conversation. Obviously, can I support more? Sure, I can support more. I can support more in every area and how we could benefit. However, I'm also trying to balance the needs of all of our constituencies, parents, community members, students, obviously most importantly, on being represented. So.
Yeah, one thing that I took when I went back and looked further at the numbers is, though the Chamberlain position seems to jump out a little bit more than the others, we are on the cusp of having bigger classes in Central School and in Orchard as well, where we already have 24 kids in some classes, which concerns me as well, particularly when there's an issue of school choice, and we don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. We don't know how it's going to shake out with kindergarten students. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one uncertainty out there. Also, just transferring in of kids, I mean, just over the past couple weeks, I know at Central School that they have 4 or 5 more kids that they're distributing among the different classes. So, I mean, having said all that, it does seem a little bit more difficult to say, all right, this is where we should add back a teacher, is at Chamberlain. But the concern that I have even more so now is kind of on the contingency side. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainties. What happens if we come to August and we find out that Chamberlain class is even bigger, or some of the Orchard classes are even bigger, or Central, any of those 3 schools? I mean, is there a possibility of, and I just raised this for discussion, of adding back, one position, but essentially keeping that open until the dust settles as far as what we're talking about at the 3 different elementary schools? So I am concerned that our hands will be tied. There isn't contingency funds that we will be able to turn to if we have the same situation as we had last summer.
Mm-hmm.
So Martin, you're saying add a teacher position back, but not identify where it will go? Just sort of set it aside in a contingency
Right. And I don't know
manner?
how that actually, if that causes more trouble than it's worth or not, as far as administration and trying to figure out where your staff is going to be. But I'm just kind of thinking a little bit larger in what we faced last summer and how we might be able to, in advance, deal with that. Mm-hmm. And having just a little bit of contingency funds, if we don't have to use that, wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Is it possible, David, for us to look at what that would look like in terms of the tax rate, like adding that
Yep.
amount of money back in and seeing what it does?
Is it working well?
Can
Yeah.
can I make a suggestion, David?
Yes.
I'm wondering if we might have some board discussion on all the potential
Okay.
changes,
Before you go in.
pluses
And
and
then do that.
minuses, and then
Okay.
maybe model it
Hold on.
once.
Sure.
Just, I mean, I think there could be a lot of iterations going on, so if,
Yeah.
Park
if
that
there's
one for-
consensus on that, maybe we put that, contingency for additional teaching support into the plus category, and then if there's further discussion on that, we can go forward. If there's some other ideas on pluses or minuses based on board consideration of the proposed budget, we can kind of keep that dialogue moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So just some clarity on that teaching position. I know, specifically it was coming up under the Chamberlain, but if that didn't exist and there were other areas in the K through 12 program that were looking to be of need, then that resource might go towards filling that, again, wherever the highest number or the highest concern might.
Or you may determine that you don't need to. I mean,
Correct.
those classes could
Yeah.
end up smaller at Chamberlain.
Just wanted to-
There could be somebody exercising choice from those
Yep.
classes. So it's just to add some flexibility when we're on the cusp of, I think, too big of class sizes in all three of the schools at different grades.
My concern with that is we know that the kindergarten has sort of a fluid, number every year. And
Right.
so there's always a good chance that we're gonna have to do something different in kindergarten. That means one is not enough, you know what I mean? One in contingency is potentially not enough. So we're gonna come to August and have to, I imagine a scenario when we're short again.
But, I mean, there will only be X amount in the
Yeah.
contingency fund to cover it, and perhaps the administration decides on having two part-times, or para, extra help, but it does give a little bit of flexibility, is all I'm looking for, I guess, at this time.
It also sounds like
This
based
is,
on.
this is Rich speaking. It just, these are all considerations that we would like to be able to put into play. However, if our compensation costs increase, if you look at this budget and you ask yourself where that's going to come from, the likely pressure on us is going to be in the opposite direction.
This is true too. But I don't think that necessarily counsels against trying to add for the flexibility that I'm talking about.
I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a case to be made for what you're saying.
Any other areas people want to comment on?
I had one other area which, this may be more controversial. And this has to do with the one-to-one program. I just want to float this as an idea. I do understand, with respect to the high school particularly, that the current plan is to roll out to 11th, to juniors and seniors, 11th and 12th grade.
No, just juniors.
I'm sorry,
Just
that's right.
11.
Yeah.
To juniors, to just 11th grade. But a lot of those classes have both juniors and seniors, and we will have juniors with laptops, and we'll have seniors without laptops, and it will cause potentially some difficulty, as I understand, in teaching these classes in one unified manner and taking advantage of the technology. There's one of a couple ways to perhaps deal with that, and the way that I'm going to float first is that we could delay for 1 year rolling out any further grades for the laptop initiative, and then the following year plan on rolling out to both the juniors and seniors. To take care of that equity issue, and it perhaps would help a little bit further with our budget for this coming year. Now, I'm just floating this right now, and I certainly want to hear the administration's input on that kind of idea, if that's just simply not workable, and it's better to go with at least rolling out to juniors this year, so.
Well, my response is technology is in our, in front of us, and, as we look at our ends and our dispositions for our students, the more we can have them, in front of technology, the better. And I think the other side of that is that, we've got, our professionals or teachers are continuing to be developed through professional development to be able to deploy those as logical resources, and you've put a good amount of money into professional development, systems and supports to do that. So obviously I'm not supportive of that. That wasn't in my preliminary budget, or my recommended budget, because I think it's hard. We've been a district that has muddled with technology, and I do feel like we have made really good grounds in moving forward and making sure kids are ready for their next step. I don't really know of the complexity that it entails around, the students. We have numbers of sophomores that in some ways are with juniors and seniors, and Patrick's here that could probably comment more in a bit, but, I think that, obviously, the upper grades are certainly going to be partnered more, and it is an issue that we don't have the 12th graders, so I don't want you, I think you're right in that, Martin, that we would like to get the whole high school on. So again, I think for all of the reasons of professional development, that's why it's not in there. But I understand what you're asking. So again, maybe Patrick, anything to add to that from what I
don't understand what you're asking. What would be the grade that doesn't get it? 9?
That juniors and
7?
seniors, instead of rolling out to just juniors this coming year, don't roll out to juniors, and then the following year they go
Yeah.
to both
They-
juniors and seniors.
Juniors already have
already have.
them.
So it's
So
actually.
you'd be saying to those kids, you've had them
Take
for
'em
2
away.
years, now you don't.
Right. Right,
Okay.
no, I
Right,
understand
so
that.
Right,
I do
In
understand
the
that.
plan, it's to roll it out to
keep
juniors
moving
and
forward.
seniors. Do you know
Uh,
what, so from our
yes,
perspective.
But not in the budget.
Yeah, okay.
But if what you're suggesting is that the current sophomores not have laptops as juniors, that would be pretty disruptive.
Well, I wanted to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, more disruptive than the half the class has them and half the class doesn't. Just because those kids, like, their learning style and the way they approach things has changed because they've never been to a high school without a one-to-one environment. So,
Can you talk about like what a grade 11 would be like with half students with laptops and half without? If there's a lot of mix between.
the biggest
juniors and
difference is going to be in terms of what we're going to be able to expect teachers to plan for. So one of the significant benefits of the lap-to-lap program as deployed by us, which is all students have the same machine with the same software, is that teachers, when they're designing their instruction, know to a pretty bulletproof level of reliability that all the students in front of them are going to have access to the online manipulatives that they're going to ask them to do, the projects, the videos, anything 24/7. If you're designing your instruction with differentiated access, then you don't design instruction that kind of favors either level of access. So then what we end up with is more kind of old school instruction, which is what this next year's seniors are kind of used to anyway, but there's other compounding issues, but I don't think we're here to talk about giving the seniors machines. It's not in the budget, so I could, talk about other issues like we've dismantled labs and things like that. So it's going to be a problem for us not having those integrated junior-senior classes in a one-to-one environment, but this budget as presented presents a number of challenges for us, so that would just be another one. Ideally, if it were in the budget, that'd be great, but that's also true for a number of other scenarios or situations.
So I'm a little confused. What is the grade level that was gonna get the new one-to-ones.
Yeah. So currently, what we have is we have our ninth graders, our 10th graders have technology. But obviously in the aging up, you age up, those sophomores become juniors, et cetera, so you have 3 in the high school. So it would have to be a depletion of the middle school, deployment.
Like
where
grade
they're-
7.
And grade 7, where
Right.
they, then those would be the, because otherwise you're essentially gonna have to take away
Right.
a device that they've had, you know? That doesn't mean you can, but again, there's, some logic in,
So to not lease for a year, which is about a $60,000 price tag, would be a decision to postpone for 1 year, 7th grade, getting it in 8th grade.
right, yeah. Yeah. And you're right on, it's 50, our lease is 58 is
58.
what we've planned, yeah.
David, could I just
Sure,
speak to that?
Stuart?
And that would, of course, also be incredibly disruptive, because what you're talking about in terms of instruction is that those teachers, those 7th and 8th grade teachers, have been developing their curriculum as they move, to utilize that technology. So again, for the kids who've never had the computers, they wouldn't miss them like the sophomores who became juniors if they didn't have computers. But it would mean, again, rewriting changes that those teachers have made within, an ongoing progression of curriculum. That would be, I think for the hard work they've done, most of them would find it pretty devastating.
Well, I felt it had to be asked.
So recorded.
Any other questions or comments on the one-to-one? Other areas we want to talk about this evening?
I'm concerned about AP Spanish and the language piece, and I'm concerned about those students who've sort of gone along from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year. They hit senior year. Where do they go? So that's a concern.
Again, and Patrick's here, the progression, obviously our desire for student opportunities is to allow them to have the progression that makes the most sense, and in this case, it's the continuation of their opportunities. So, that said, we also need to be looking at what other opportunities are there for students to continue to grow and learn in their academic endeavors and dispositions, et cetera. And I think one of the things we pride ourselves on in our district is we have a multitude of opportunities, and certainly it's a reduction. So to say these students won't be able to go somewhere else is probably not true. However, that experience will be drastically different. And Patrick, I would defer to you for additional.
And Tucumán's there too, so jump in. We're still going to have AP Spanish. We're not going to have, depending on how it schedules, it's unlikely that we'll have 2 sections of AP Spanish. And so that limits students based upon what it conflicts with. So if it conflicts with AP Physics, then it's choice time for those kids. But what the scenario you described where students aren't able to complete the sequence is true in Japanese. It would be true in Japanese. So a student who's been part of that sequence is, if this is the budget that adopted Japanese goes away, then those students, that's an interrupted sequence, and there's no getting around that.
The scheduling complexity is a big component with this, where, you can say you still have it, but if you only have it a limited period of time, then it really, given that the other competing interests for a student to complete their academic program puts up blocks, because you can only get this here, and you gotta take this here, and obviously,
And we
those are
don't,
some of the issues.
we don't know where those Japanese students are going to migrate to, but we know they're not going to migrate to AP Spanish. You know,
Yeah. I misunderstood. I didn't realize it was a section of AP Spanish. I thought there was just no AP Spanish. So I misunderstood
and,
that.
and I don't wanna go too far into scheduling a almost 1,000-student high school, but it could be that there's no section of AP Spanish. If when it comes time to register for AP Spanish, only like 5 kids sign up, and then in that case, and that's unlikely based on our projections, but it's a crystal ball. So, but at this time, I think, and Teresa, I mean, I think we're gonna be up against, you know, the unmagic number in terms of AP Spanish, 30, you know. And then, gosh, you know, that's a lot of kids in a high-level Spanish class, but then you see 15, and that kind of jumps off the page like a C minus, you know, and you're, geez, that seems like not very many. So that's our crystal ball in AP Spanish, based on, you know, everything we have, the kids we know that are in pre-AP Spanish 4. That's our best guess. But it gets compounded by when you create singletons, you limit access, so then if what we really want our kids to take AP Spanish, it's kind of what I said last week, running 2 sections is exponentially better than running 1. And this happened to us in physics a lot. Physics used to conflict with AP French, I think, and some other really popular class, music or something. And so for a long time, we thought we had a problem with physics, like why weren't kids taking physics? And then when we added a second section of physics, all of a sudden, physics really took off. And so, you know, and then success breeds success in that respect. So it's tightening up a pretty complicated algorithm in terms of the high school schedule. Fewer sections you offer of certain classes, the harder it is for kids to get them.
Lisa?
Can I just make a comment on the AP Spanish? You're talking about next year, but the following year would be this year's freshmen coming over from middle school. This year's freshman class, 25% of those kids went right to Spanish 3.
Right.
And they were in line to take AP Spanish in 2 years.
Right.
So you're gonna have, you know, assuming you have the same amount of kids moving through the Spanish track, you're gonna have this bubble in 2 years.
In 3 years. The program's changing a little bit, so it'll be 3, 4 pre-AP, AP.
Okay.
But yes, that bubble will move.
That's
On the
actually a
radar.
good problem, to be honest, because I think, you're the expert, Teresa, but from what Teresa's told me, that shift 6-8 is really helping us get kids to that AP level, which is what we aspire to in all of our languages, you know, including Japanese, but, so I suspect that we'll be able to do that. And since the number of kids probably won't increase, it's just going to be a different teaching assignment. So we should be able to staff it adequately, I hope. I mean, or we certainly will be able to see it coming to make recommendations around staffing that adequately.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
About the algebra for 7th grade students. So will that not be offered anymore, or it will be just a larger class size?
Will not be offered,
It will not be offered.
right. We've not had a high number of students in that, although, again, similarly, you know, looking at providing those opportunities for the students, we made that work.
I thought they went into an 8th grade class.
Some of them did in the past years, but this, as a result of the schedule, that off-team, again, didn't work to match. And so really trying to be consistent with developmentally appropriate teams, we wanted to make sure they were within the team. And so when their fellow students were doing math, they were too. And so they weren't missing other components because the alignment between the 2 grades didn't match. Again, they were able to get it, and again, that will be part of future discussions around how we continue to meet their needs, but that's certainly, that's where we are.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other areas? I'd like to bring up a couple areas, and one is really it's a reduction in this year's operating budget, but it is a liability the district would continue to hold, and that's in the nutritional services deficit. I believe this budget included about $125,000, David, to pay down the nutritional services deficit. And one of the contingencies the board had when we originally had discussed including that was a review of the program and kind of what it would take to get the program into the black. And we haven't been able to schedule that yet, so I wanted to really get my colleagues' feedback of whether or not you think that we should exclude that additional pay down this operating year until we have a chance to review the nutritional services plan.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now, so I think that's a good move to do that.
I would keep it in there.
Can you talk?
I just think we have a growing, I mean, we're at $325,000 right now. It's been a problem for multiple years, and I think we need to do something to deal with it. And I think for us to do nothing is irresponsible.
Is there sort of an abbreviated version that you can give us, David, about the plan going forward to reduce it
Well,
over
again,
time?
there is a plan that's being developed, and again, Wynn has been working on that. I have not really had the time to sit down with him and look at the intricacies, where it is, where we're going, and how we're looking to resolve. What I know is that it continues to be, it continues to be a draw. And so again, that number will be reported as well, which will be on top of the previous amount that, again, the 320, I don't have that exact number, but that is close. And so, as you know, in the first iteration of the budget, it was all in. And then there was an iteration where it was halved. And then under the recommended budget, it went all back in. And again, it's in there because, it is an identified need. Again, you do not have all of the details on how we're going to get ourselves forward, so I totally understand that. It's a known liability, and that's why the money's there.
And Julie,
It's just, this is Rich speaking, I think we just have to deal with these known liabilities, and it doesn't really help our situation to pretend to duck it this year.
Rich, this is Elizabeth, and to you and Julie, to actually everyone, one of my rationales for recommending that is I think we have, made an effort to cover that deficit kind of each year with anticipating, I know since I've served on the board, we've run a deficit, and each year it's more or less, but we have to make a decision kind of how much to cover and when to cover it. And I guess one of my feelings is based on 7 years of service on the board is I feel like until the water level is depleted to the level where the rocks are really showing, I'm not sure we're going to fully understand what we really need to do to get that program in the black. So I do feel like in some ways we're, kind of hobbling year to year with this deficit. And again, I have not heard of a plan to get it in the black that's been implemented yet. So I understand it's an ongoing liability, and whether we cover it this year or in a future year, it will need to get covered because it's a past expense at this point. But I also feel like to expose the deficit on an ongoing basis for what it is may really challenge the creativity of our teams that support this service to figure out how we're going to run it in the black. Mm-hmm. And that's really.
I wish I thought that were true. I don't think it really will. I think we're just playing pretend with the numbers to not say we're going to cover it.
Okay. Why don't we put that on kind of a list? I'll bring up my fourth issue, and then we can kind of ask, we'll determine what we want to model, unless there's anything else any board member wants to bring up. The last area really comes from the Citizens Advisory Group, and it has to do with our expenses around substitutes. And I don't think we have any, I know I don't have any kind of unique insight as to how to reduce this or what to reduce it by, but I also know this is an area that has come up consistently in my tenure on the board as an area that seems to be pretty high for our district, and that could go across every functional area. It's not exclusive to any specific staff group, but one of the recommendations I wanted to make tonight is really to look at kind of a token reduction of 5 or 10% in the budget that would draw some attention to it, but also to direct, David and your team to look at studying the area so that we can better manage that. And I understand we have some contractual obligations to provide substitutes under certain circumstances, but it does seem to be a significant portion of the budget, and it has grown over the years. And if you think about the direct instructional time, for instance, within the specific group of teachers, let alone some of the other staff, that certainly does affect the delivery of services. So that would be another recommendation I have is I'll just recommend a 10% reduction in the budget with a direction of studying the area to minimize it going forward.
Elizabeth, this is Rich. I think that's an interesting proposition. Unlike most cuts that are made in a budget, if this cut were made, I would expect that the effect of that on the quality of our program is that the quality of the program would rise rather than fall. So I'm very interested in your proposal. I'd like to ask David, what would you do if you were directed to cut substitute costs by 10%?
I'm not sure, Rich, part of, what we've done with our budgeting is, again, we look at historical components. It's a complex issue, and I'm not wanting to make this bigger than it is. It is a complex issue, and many, it's not as easy just to think that it's, and I'm not saying that the board's saying it's abuse either, it's, because in some ways, we've seen upticks in these areas around, family medical leave requirements, paternity leave requirements. Again, some of those more significant changes over time, and also our faculty age also has a play in that as well. Whether again an employee has a child, no child, etc. And again, I'm not wanting to stereotype any of those. So there's been some changes in that area. To say that we couldn't look at it and be more diligent, again, I think it's the direction the board is certainly allowed to give me. I don't know if I could be successful at meeting the 10% or the whatever. I would go forth with your direction and do the very best I can to look at it and work with my administrative team to work at it. There are some different models out there we've talked about. It's, you can talk about at the high school, hire 2 full-time additional teachers that then deploy. We've looked at that some, not most recently, but that's sometimes when you need more than 2, I'm just giving you an example, then you're back out there again. So there's a fine line on the number, but again, I hear the charge, and again, my general feedback to you is that.
Is your charge, Elizabeth, for across the board substitutes? Because there's more than one line item of substitutes.
I would tend to look at it in aggregate.
Right.
I don't even know what the number would be. I'm really just setting a goal out that kind of, again, is open for discussion, but the point would be to based on the Citizens Advisory Group feedback, to focus some attention on the area.
Again, we'll
Let me ask this specific question. Do we have the ability, if it's what we had to do, and I would hope it wouldn't be the first thing to do, but do we have the ability to reduce substitute teacher compensation by 10%? If that's the way we were, if that's what you had to do
Yeah, I would say that that would not probably be the most recommended. It's, then you don't have the number of individuals that are willing to do it. I mean, we're currently, at the present time, we're needing to look at our current, per day substitute, rate. Again, in many areas. I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's certainly, we have to stay somewhat on par with those that are around us. Just, so I think, a significant reduction of that would be problematic, and then we wouldn't be able to have the same pool. But again, there's a variety of additional things that we can be looking at. So I guess what I would say is if it's a 10% reduction or whatever your charge is, then if that's what gets approved, then afford me the opportunity to work with the administrative group to figure out how we can look at that amount of money and deploy it in the most efficient way, or whatever the case may be.
Well, and let me be clear with you, David, if we did do this, the preferred way to find that 10% is to use 10% less substitute time, obviously. I'm just wondering, if you can't do that, how you would achieve this, and that's the only way I can think of that would guarantee that you could do it.
Yeah. Understand, I mean, part of it could be some benchmarking, quarterly benchmarking, looking at, a variety of things. I'm not gonna have it all right tonight, but again, allow us to think, about it more deeply, and, I think I recognize the charge, I understand.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a
Yes.
comment. I'm Irene Sauer. Isn't it going to be difficult to reduce substitute time without changing contracts when we've said that employees can have this many days off?
I mean, it's not necessarily about not covering, it's about how we cover from within our organization. So if we have, 10 substitutes identified between, high school and middle school, maybe there's an ebb and flow that happens more. Again, I don't have the solution. It's not to not uphold our contractual components. When somebody's out and sick, they should be out because they're sick. We don't want them to be in front of, children and infecting others. But how we cover that is really the task at the administrative hand, not to violate contractual obligations, but to figure it out in a more efficient way is, again, what the board's discussing at the present.
Other questions, comments? Any other areas?
Just a suggestion that if there's significant interest on the part of my colleagues in doing this, maybe the way to do it is to start with a more modest number.
Do you have a recommendation?
Well,
Well, it doesn't
It's not rocket science. I'm thinking 5% rather than 10%.
well,
10%
10%,
is 30,000.
did you hear that, Rich? 10% is 30,000, 5% would be
Right.
15,000. I'm really quick. I'm tutoring, man.
Yeah, what I don't know, and again, you have to, would afford me, if that's an area that you want, afford me, make sure we're cutting across all of our,
Right.
if a total aggregate was what I heard, it's not specific to an employee group, and it's a total aggregate, and, let us, I'll give you the number.
There's actually another line.
Yeah, I
So-
would say, Rich, at that dollar amount, I think we can, we'll likely be able to afford to miss the mark by a little versus not set the bar high enough to focus attention on it. And that would be my feedback.
And that didn't, that
Right.
number that we
Oh,
gave, the number we gave you did not include the long-term substitute teachers.
Right, and I wasn't, including that.
Okay.
Hey, what do you think about that $30,000 figure? What are your thoughts?
You
Is that
give me the charge, and I go forward. I'm really, again, I go back, I provided a recommended budget, to say that in a almost $43 million budget, there isn't some areas that can be more closely looked at, would be wrong. I'm getting some charges from you, and if that's the recommendation, we'll go forward. It's complex. The substitute arena is complex. Most people come in and can see that, there's gotta be horrific abuse, or there's, when you look at all of our employee groups and the benefits in which they're afforded under the laws and regulations, you begin to see a clearer picture of really what happens. And so that's not to say, and again, there's other things that we're trying to do and helping people to keep healthy, around, our Path Wellness programs and things of that nature, which I think in education, those that are surrounded, we have a pretty good record of that. So I think there's some challenges out there. I had in my career, and I think others in the room have looked at a lot of other models, up to including, contractual services for substitutes through a subgroup that maybe that's a bidded out process that we think about, or for certain programs. I think it's challenging, but I respect that you're bringing it up and asking the question.
Well, again, in terms of material impact on our overall budget, this is not the biggest line item, but again, I'm looking at the feedback we got from the Citizens Advisory Group and trying to be respectful of the charter that group had, and just putting a little bit of a spotlight on an area that we've seen some increases and probably need to understand better as a board. And, it may be just the attention itself will drive some reduction. So that's the framework I'd give you on that one.
So, that would be something I'll just need to go and find if you want the total aggregate, or unless you just wanted to, pick a number, an estimate of that 10%. I'm not sure what you want to do with that.
So are there any other areas the board wants to model at this point?
I guess I'd go back, I'd pick $30,000 because it's approximately 10%. Unless we're
Unless we're reading the numbers wrong, but I think we're right.
Confirm.
Paraprofessional substitutes and substitute teachers, it's on page 10 of what we're looking at.
So at this point, what I've heard is and let's maybe just get some consensus here for modeling purposes, is to add some contingency for additional support for teachers for a teaching position.
Or it could be, if it comes out that there's a need for 2 paras,
Okay,
it's
so
just a
for contingency for additional support of $65,000. We're not going to make any changes on the nutritional services. Can we get some feedback on that?
I think we should put something towards that. I just think to carry that over, I know we have a plan moving forward, but I feel like we need to do something about that rather than just carry it year to year.
Yeah, I agree, although, I could go with, I don't have a strong feeling on this one, but I don't think we need to put the full 125 in this year.
How did you choose the 125, David?
Again, it was basically, what we felt was reasonable given the amount that we're currently in the red.
Yeah.
And there was, trying to get as close to the kind of the 50% mark, and doing that. Again, I provided rationale at the 65,000 too, and that it was at least working to, kind of quarter the amount in getting there. So, as you can see, it's not paying it all off. It's, not even half. And so it was
The
movement.
other issue that's not addressed here is we have an unfunded pension liability as well, and underfunded.
Funded.
Yeah. We're funding that at
The minimum.
what level for this year?
At our minimum
60
amount,
something.
which is, I don't have it off the top of my head. I can find out for you.
But it was based on, we took the recommendation of the
Okay.
actuaries, and we
Correct.
had a little bit of a carryover.
Correct. So
Which we are
a little
applying.
above.
Are we applying it to the minimum funding?
We are.
Okay.
So we're, I forget the exact percentage, we're just above
only
the
taking it.
actuarial
Okay.
amount.
Okay. So at this point, again, if I've got consensus, it'll be contingency for additional support. We're gonna keep the year of the 1-to-1 lease in. We're going to keep the nutritional services deficit in at the full amount.
I still think that should be reduced.
Well, do you have a recommendation? We could reduce it by the additional contingency amount so that at least we know we've netted that out.
Right, yeah, I mean, I would do that to kind of also, see how the numbers play out.
Move it to 65?
Yeah.
Or?
Rich,
so we-
it looks like we've got some consensus to reduce the paying off the nutritional services deficit by about half to offset the add to contingency.
So the 65,000, halving it?
Yep.
No, it's not exactly half, but
Approximately, and then a $30,000 reduction in the aggregate substitute. Okay, anything else?
I'm not in agreement on the nutritional services point, but I wouldn't, I know when I voted even if I'm not there.
So what I have is the 65 for contingency added back in, or in addition, that's an increase. 65,000 reduced out of the nutritional service line,
Right,
and then reduced 30,000 out of
in aggregate.
an aggregate of substitute.
Okay. Shall we take,
We can actually, if you want, we can,
it now?
have you been keeping up at all on the development sheet?
I think I have what you can do. We'll just turn that on and.
Yeah. So, I think, Elizabeth, the next step would be just to see on the budget development sheet what it does. And you should be able to see A and B as well. And then we can go and firm up so that you'll have something in front of you to see.
While this is coming up, I'll just tell you that this pivot table is not exactly behaving itself, so we'll do our best that we can. Right now, you're looking at, and I haven't made the change, I just put the numbers in. You're looking at a $354 tax bill on a average South Burlington home valued at $323,000. If we were to go down and see what the A and B, this is Part A, 41 mil, 742 and change. Part B would be 658 and change. And if I think what you're doing is you're adding in 95,000, 30 plus 65? No. What are you adding back in?
The net is that we are, it's 30,000.
30,000.
reduction?
So it's really on
So it's on-
line,
So it's on 70,
just minus 30.
okay.
Nope,
Minus 30.
just minus 30.
30 from 100,000?
Nope, just minus 30 on that line, right where you're at. What we did is there was some ups and downs, so
Right.
the net result of that discussion is a minus 30, so just do minus
It
30,000.
won't take it that way, so tell me what you want to accomplish. This is 631 reduction, less 100,000. Which way do you want to go?
Well, make the reduction 61 then.
Make it 61?
Is that right? No, on the red,
on the red.
on the red line.
I don't know, I don't think I can change
Oh,
that.
we can go change this for you, and
Right.
it will show, and I can just print them out for you, and take a short recess. I don't know why this isn't working now, but, so, is that kind of the charge? It'd be nice for you to see this, so, I don't know why it's not working. Yeah, I would just wait here. Again, this is John's spreadsheet, so.
Okay, should we take a 10-minute recess? And-
So we'll plug that number in,
Okay.
and we'll come back also with what that would look like on your B
On
portion.
the summary sheet and the B portion.
Correct.
Okay.
So give us a few minutes and we'll go and do that.
All right, we're taking a 10-minute recess. Rich, we're in recess.
Email that to me.
Yes, and we will,
Sorry.
what we come up with, I'll send it to you to your Gmail account. Okay?
And are you gonna leave me on, or are you gonna call me back?
What would you like to do?
I don't care.
Just keep him on.
Why don't you just stay on? That'd be easy, I think.
I got it.
Okay.
I just figured it was covered.
going there.
Well, not so good. We're getting there. We've been having some pretty great things. So he was here today. He spent all day, he spent all morning. Came back tonight for a 4 o'clock meeting. So I'm optimistic about respect. It's been a tough nutrition service staff. Veterans. We'll talk to them 4 to 6 about that. It's not fun when it's still in but out of respect and courtesy to them, meeting with them, this is like the next thing to vet what best practices are, how we move forward, how we can be a leader program, nutrition service. You see some kinds of issues.
Thank you very much. Yes, I did. I did. Thank you very much. Yes, I meant
The old paradigm change. As Elizabeth said that night, we presented the official program. You can't tinker around the edges. We've got to really look at the structural I've been here for 11 years. It is. You see, I feel badly. Because we all provide benefits for all of our people. And yet, nutrition services staff. So we have 4 countries. Steve Marinelli is the service director. He said he's not a teacher. He doesn't have any the programs that are doing very good work. Part of it's going to be He said trouble finding part-time staff that like the school year, parents,
works for some reason. Just log on.
Irene's selling us on the cookie.
You sure this one doesn't?
Did you and Nathan on here?
Yeah.
See, I don't see, they got saved and just back at it here.
Ready? Oh, there we go.
Well, I just like to pull it up so we can show. I did make enough copies, I think, for everybody to have. Well, it was 216, so it went down and took 30,000 out. Okay. Makes sense. You know, what do you want to do? Would you like to try to show it up here?
Yeah.
Hey, look. Yeah, I just shut down.
Yeah, hi. How are you?
I just want to let you know that I spared you because Mia wanted to bring you her piggy bank.
Oh, she did?
Help me
Oh, that's
desperately
cute.
buy her a t-shirt.
Oh.
And I've had the pleasure of meeting your mother. I know.
I told her I knew you.
So those can go.
She's thrilled
I need one of
working
those.
with
Just take
you.
one.
Oh, it's so different. So different than the newspaper.
Mark and Julie.
Is
and then-
it?
It's like
Yeah.
Oh, and on your
flip
It's a
flop.
big
I'm only
thing.
there when my daughter's in school.
It's, yeah. Is it a good role? I mean, it seems like it could be very fun, although those darn seniors can be demanding.
It seems from the very short 4 months that I've been there that too many people have been there for too long before me. Who
Yes.
said, sure, we'll do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
Two
you're
steps
got a
later,
lot of.
gave it up and forgot it. And I'm like, they're human beings, and they are phenomenal human beings. You know, there are people that are kind of a pain, but, you know, they deserve more respect than anybody, you know, and to just,
Well, I think it's a great development. I think it's a great development. My mother is really happy there, and you know, she moved out of a family home after like 50 some odd years, so that was a big move.
it is a big move. And when I talk to new people who want to come in, they look around like, and I said, you're trying to figure out how to get your house in here, are you? I'm like, well, you're not going to, so.
Yes,
We just trying to think of
get
some
over there.
choices,
Yeah,
but-
yeah. Actually, yeah. I mean, you know, my mother her house is in miniature in the apartment, which is great. Yeah, she loves it. She really loves it.
Cracks to do, but
Well, other than the cracks, yeah. Thanks. All right, where did oh,
Trying.
are we ready or
Loading it over. The profile takes a bit. I'm just about there.
okay?
Seems slower than that.
Try.
No, don't stop.
Well, I don't think we have a lot of choice. I don't know, I get a feeling, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Hey, Elizabeth.
Yes. Yeah.
Hello, Rich.
He should be.
Oh,
All right, we're just checking, waking you up.
still awake.
Not letting us down when we need it.
No, that's good. That's actually good because it's look at 242. Staying at 42. You know that's symbolic. That's great.
Closer to this, but, you know,
Oh, you're a good point. Yeah. Well, yeah, this too is.
yeah.
Although, yeah, that's with CLA.
We could do a preliminary discussion tonight. And maybe it's too much to add, but like once we're communicating with that, just.
I think we should put that.
Yeah, okay. We're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. I think we have our data input here. Should I turn it over to you, David?
Yeah. It's fine. It's warming up. So Elizabeth, I think people if you don't have a handout, while the screen comes on here, we made the reduction of the 30,000 as directed. And let me just walk you through what that represents, and then take any questions that you have. What you see here is the amount that was the preliminary budget that was presented on the December 19th. This was what represented the preliminary budget reduction. And then the additional $30,000 reduction represents a total budget of $42,986,751, which represents a 2.09% increase over last year's expenditures. Revenues don't change. Draw from the ed fund is 6.92 now, and then your tax rate is 11.29. Your two vote portion, or A and B, I should say. Again, we have further reduced this based on exemptions, and this was a handout that I provided the board just, I don't know what day it was, yesterday, the day before yesterday, I sent that to you. The exemptions, basically, for programs that are student-specific services, you are able to exempt them from B. So the total exemptions represent the $515,849 here. And so then you see that the total, Part A then becomes the 41 plus the 515 equals the 42,258,065. Part B then represents 728,686, which then total budget 42,968,751.
And do we have detail as to what is in Part B, David?
We do. That information was provided to you at the last meeting. I don't have that. Let's see, exemptions from preliminary.
David, I have a question as well.
Yes.
I'm not sure that the fourth, wait a second, maybe I looked at the wrong one. No, I take that back. I apologize. I was looking at.
I don't have a copy of that open in the exemptions that were identified.
Well, it's not the exemptions, it's what's in Part B.
What's in Part B?
Yeah,
Is that page 3 in the packet?
right. I don't have it on here.
Could you explain this exemption thing?
Sure.
What's it mean? What's it mean to the ballot in particular?
Well, it doesn't change the bottom line number. What it changes what can be put in B portion.
Can be
of
put in this.
What can, or it allows you the flexibility based on student-specific services. If there are student-specific services that qualify for high-risk or at-risk students, then you can exempt them from B and put them back up into A.
So that makes A larger?
That makes A larger, correct.
You don't have to cycle anything out of A down to D?
No, B was established based on, factors specific to the total budget. That was an aggregate number that had to be in B, but what this allows you to do, this is a provision that's specific to student-centered services, allows you to exempt out of B, put it back up into A, essentially breaking that formula, but because of student at-risk services. Okay?
Bizarre.
There's some questions, so when we look at this, again, this is, we've been continuing to look at a variety of these things. We believe that, again, these exemptions are very much appropriate to be taken out of B.
But not offset with other moves out of A.
But nothing moves out of A. Again, A is that very prescribed aggregate that's recommended. So,
And your B
yes.
is here, do you want to?
Again, that was what was handed out. I don't have that open up on the screen. Again, what's being referred to is what was included in Part B. And so we have a spread of academic programs K through 12. This is where we have included K through 5 teachers. Again, this is what's in B. This does not mean that they're out. It just means what's going to be in B, which will allow the voters to make a decision on saying yes or no to B. What we did administratively was to try to be very diligent about it being a K through 12 reduction, K through 12 allocation, excuse me. So in here was K through 5 level, there's 124,000 in there. There's 128 out of the middle school, 196 out of the high school that's attributed here. Support for K program, security and crisis team costs at 98,000, replacement of one bus, carpet, flooring replacement, summer help for facility work, meeting our technology needs and ensuring adequate supplies are available for district-wide. So those are in the budget, but articulated in B for a sum total of $758,686.
A question, is it required that the district actually identify what is in B? I just want to make sure I
Well, it's not really, it's not a requirement, but we feel we have to make it a requirement because we want people to be educated on what's in B. It has to be a number. Under the exemption component, we can take things out of B. Other than that, we identify, and it was up to me, and administratively, we talked about then the disbursement across all programs. So it's,
Was that equivalent to the cuts that we saw when we asked to go to 7 cents? I mean, because that's kind of, in my mind,
Close.
what we were going
Yeah.
to see as far as in B, or that was the rationale. I didn't know that you had to list it out at this point, but
Right.
that's kind of in part was the point of that exercise, was to see, all right, to get to the rid of B. what
right, you
would
had to
we
make more
lose?
teachers, that's right.
Right.
This doesn't quite get there, remember we were at 5, we were at 9 on the teachers for the 7 cent at the elementary level. This represents, not to that total. It's closer to that thinking of what we did.
I'm asking because, if this is the budget that we're gonna propose, I want to be able to articulate to voters, well, here is, what you would have lost if we were down to 7 cents, where we were down to where we didn't have B.
It doesn't equal the 7 cent mark one, it's
It's actually a little lower.
It's a little, that's right. So what I felt was important was to make sure it was a K through 12 program contribution, that was in it, that's all. And K through 12 and district contribution. And, there could be some questions on how equitable that might be between, our various grades or district, but this has something in it for everyone at the present time. Therefore, it has some importance for people to get out and communicate and vote. for
So,
me.
on that subject, for tonight, there doesn't have to be a decision of what's
If you don't
necessarily
like that,
B.
that's
If
right.
we want
If
to
you-
talk a little bit further about
Right.
how best
Agreed.
to present this.
That's right.
But I assume this is gonna be in the budget book, and what's the deadline for that?
We're working on it. It will be the next couple of weeks. We'll be working on our budget book information and finalization. So we've got, I don't know do you know what the actual?
Steering committee meeting
On
next
the-
week, we're gonna present this.
Yeah, so but as far as our budget book, that's, I think we have a couple of weeks on the budget book, right? End of January, first part of February.
I think the beginning of February.
Yeah.
And I think that in the very near future, we'll have to put on the agenda how we're going to communicate the budget and what strategies we're gonna
That was
use.
gonna be, that's one of my components, when you get to an adoption to then talk about, again, administratively, we did some brainstorming as well around, thinking about communication strategies, not just you, but also us and others in the mix. So some of which you've done before, but expanding that, because we know that this is going to be a really important year to communicate thoroughly with our public.
Well, let me ask one more question along those lines. With respect to B, we're not going to be giving the, well, we're going to give an impression, I want to know if it's false, of if you don't vote for this is what you're going to lose. Because if B is voted down and we have to go back to the table, I don't know that we want to necessarily be tied to this list of things that you have in for B, because we may have more information there. We're going to be further along in contract talks.
Right, so you
And
can't say
so
that.
I'm a little concerned about saying right up front, here's what you're definitively going to lose if you vote down B, and we go back. At that point, I mean, it's kind of all open up anyway, what we're gonna come back with is another budget. But do you understand? I'm just
Yep, no, I
concerned
think
about
you're right.
sending the wrong information or impression.
Yeah, so let me just, we're gonna have to, we have some time between the time in which your adoption tonight and town meeting. And I have contractual obligations that I need to obviously be making as well. And so if I have to be mindful about, where I'm going to be able to make some reductions. So I'm gonna have to be smart about these items and how I'm going to be able to get it if we have to revise B, if B goes down, for instance. So I do think it's important to have some level of clarity. I agree, you don't have to decide that tonight. But
Well, it sounds like we have to if we're going to steering
Well, you-
committee. I guess my
well-
main point would be is in communicating what's in B is that this isn't definitively what the cuts would be. This is along the lines of what you can expect of not having funded if it's in B, but this isn't tie the board's hands. You can say it more elegantly, but it'll be subject to further discussions with the board.
My desire with you was to provide you the level of clarity and my thinking around what's in B, because I think that's important. I didn't arrive at a number that was simply arbitrary.
Sure.
But it had some attachments to it. And from my perspective, trying to be inclusive of our system, there was thinking K through 12 and district around the disbursement, of that amount.
This is
so
a
that
first
was the
shot
thing.
at it,
Yep,
essentially.
yep.
Okay.
And again, it does say draft. Again, the amount is correct. Obviously, you can move things around, but again, I feel like this is an important component for me and integrity of the system is to have something like that at play. Because again, if it was all just one area or one school or one level, then I think that would be, problematic for our system as well.
Well, I think that.
Can we move back one step on this? David, would it be fair to say that if Part B were voted down twice, that these would be the things you would recommend to the board that it cut?
I wouldn't probably say it that way. I would say that there would be things within this area that I would be recommending we take a look at for some reductions. I wouldn't want to say that it would be all gone, or, I would start in some chronological order. It would really be to take a look at them and to go back out to the public with what we think could be reasonable, given the feedback that they're giving us, which, again, your direction could be go right back out with the same after more thorough communications about the components that are in there, or, a significant reduction, whatever maybe the place. This, again, is part of the concern of the split vote, and also this is the last year of it. And again, most of our colleagues around the state are being faced with the same situation. Some have been in the past, but significant numbers right now are going to be hit with the second vote.
Yeah, I'm a little
Here's what you're saying, David. If you think about this from the perspective of the average voter, it's fair for the voter to understand what it would mean to vote B down twice, which means to me that I think by the time we get to the budget book, we need to be able to say at least that this is what the administration would recommend. If not, and it would be better if we were gonna say, if we lost this twice, this is what we would do.
Yeah, I don't, the twice, I mean, we have time limits before we can go back out, Rich, and do it, and vote it again. You know, I would need to map that out for you to know, you know, what timeline, you know, would be at bay. I think it's a 30-day return period before you can go back out and vote again. You may not choose to do that. So again, I would, walking into just the two, I think, you know, I would need to provide you more detail on, you know, what ifs.
Well, I think we're clear on what the numbers would be in Part A and Part B. I would agree, though, with some of the feedback you're getting, David, on the peanut butter approach with some flexibility isn't as compelling a story to tell for the board when we take the budget out and we're looking for support. Because, you know, what to me, what will be compelling is to say class sizes at these levels will go up by 5 students at the elementary. I mean, it will be some metric that will be more compelling in terms of seeking voter approval on Part B. But I can envision a scenario where if you're trying to keep it flexible, there may be some line items that got approved in Part A that you all of a sudden have to take out if you revisit Part B if it's voted down twice. And I also think that's not fair representation to the community either.
Right.
So I would try to, I'd recommend seeking some clarity on Part B and some metrics that really describe to the community what Part B means.
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah, again, I felt like, you know, again, this is a draft that I provided you just on my thinking around the contents of B. And certainly I'll think about strategies and more thoroughly around the what ifs if B was to go down and what would be the next recommendation so that can be communicated.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Okay. Do we have a motion regarding the 2014 budget?
I'll move that the latest draft that David gave us with the 30,000 additional reduction be passed and brought to the voters.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget as revised and discussed this evening. Any other questions or discussion? Rich, any comments?
Well, I think it's a reasonable budget if you look at the amount of the increase, and so I'm happy to support it.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 All right. The revised budget as presented this evening is approved.
Thank you. So you'll have the warning that we'll need to sign. We'll have that, actually, Delina has it as we speak. If you want, we can do that right at the conclusion, if you want, Elizabeth and board members.
Okay.
And we can continue on our...
All right. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item, well, actually, we'll have do we need to take action on the warning? We just...
I think you, yes, you do need to take action. I think the signing of the warning will be fine.
Okay.
You know, you've approved the budget, it's just the action, you need to sign it, so.
Okay,
it'll be
so
fine.
we'll just do that at the end.
Yeah.
And we'll move on to agenda item number 7, setting the agenda for the February 6th meeting.
You want to do action, you think we should? Have we done it in the past, Delina?
No. All
Well,
right.
we don't have, do we have?
Yeah, we do have it.
We have it here.
The one that with the correction?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
we did, Delina was doing that when we did that.
Okay, should I read through this? Is that typical then?
It represents exactly what you presented in there. I think the article as written, as past action that the board took on the budget, I think was fine.
Okay.
Unless you want to read it, it doesn't matter, right?
And John Stewart just verified it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so right now we are, I'll take a motion to approve the warning as revised and presented on the annual meeting, Article 1, election of officers, and Article 2, the budget.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great,
All right. The warning is approved, and we'll sign that at the end of the meeting.
yep, thank you.
All right. Agenda for February 6th. I think, Diane, you've mentioned an initial discussion of a budget communication plan. Should we add that, David,
I
to
think
the agenda?
that's excellent.
I guess I'd also, maybe this is too early in the process, but I'd like to have on the agenda fairly quickly, starting to talk about the 3 to 5 year planning on financial. When the iron is hot.
Yep.
I don't know if that should be a future agenda item, or if that could be fit in as for an initial discussion at the next meeting.
We've moved along, again, this is into the 2020 thinking and the 3 to 5. This has been also discussed with the budget advisory. We have still work to do on it. I think it's fine if you want to have it on, you can kind of see work in progress.
Right.
So I'm fine to do that. We won't have it complete, but I think it's fine that we give you that update.
Will the administrative reports on nutrition services be ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you do board evaluation? Is that the first meeting or is that the second?
You're up for the next,
This, like the 6th.
yeah, you're up for that. This-
So we'll do that. And will we be ready on items 7 and 8 as well?
When do you know on,
That the, depends on the attorney. We'll make every attempt to do that.
I think we gotta get that resolved, so we'll push, we need to
Okay.
push on that.
And I guess just backing up to number 4, that's where presumably we'll get the update as far as the Howard Center contracts and stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to link it to the number 4, or would
It
you like to
doesn't-
have it
no,
under my
it doesn't.
report? Probably
Your-
under,
Yeah, your report probably is better. It doesn't
Okay.
necessarily link.
that would maybe make, okay, so I would feel better about that. I'll put it under my report.
Okay, unless there's anything else for the February 6th meeting, we'll move on to future agenda items.
We're working through those items, trying to get them in front of you, continue to do that.
I remember a time when our list went away, and now
Yeah,
it's grown
it's
again.
I was gonna add something to it as well.
Yes.
Just the board evaluations, I think we should revisit them. I think they're fairly useless. We either shouldn't do them or should do them in a different manner. Because it's done at the end of the meeting, we're tired, and it's,
Just want to have a conversation about.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't really talk about
Well,
Right.
the items at all.
I hated to have to raise that, but it's been in the back of my mind for
Well,
the
let's-
last several weeks.
So we'll put it on a future agenda, I mean, maybe we can, as we.
Yeah.
Could we maybe just take care of it next time? If we, since it's on the agenda, board evaluation, could we just have a little bit of a discussion rather than add it to a growing list?
Well, I mean, maybe what my suggestion might be is that we delineate some time, as it should be. I mean, under policy maybe we should talk a little bit more about how it could be a more helpful tool. I think that is
Right.
helpful to me. I mean, I get to hear some feedback and I'm internalizing, how I can be doing, because it's a two-part, it's about you and about me.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
but
think-
if there's a disagreement on one of those items,
Yeah.
you don't always know what it's about. I
But
mean, do you know what I mean? Which
yeah,
is
so-
is that a good learning tool for
No,
you?
but I think that's that could be embedded, where it's, then maybe there's a follow-up and more specifics, again, I think it can be helpful.
Yeah, well, there
I
was
don't
a,
wanna
there
just throw
was a
the tool
very
out.
deliberate discussion when we chose that board evaluation process with those two tools. I think in practice, it's turning out to be less helpful than maybe we anticipated. So because there was such a deliberate process in choosing those policy tools, I think maybe David's accurate in saying it's worth a longer discussion on it.
I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'd like it to be valuable, and instead of just not doing it, how could we make it better?
Right.
Right.
Or, whatever, because, it's good.
All right, we'll move on to the minutes of the January 9th meeting. Any revisions or modifications to those?
Yeah, I have a couple. So Lisa's last name is spelled wrong on page 2. And also, on page 3, on consider the minutes of the meeting, it says Mr. Cassidy announced, and Mr. Cassidy was not here, so Mrs. Fitzgerald announced. That's it.
Sure of that.
Great.
So barring any additional feedback, those minutes are approved with changes. And we'll move on to any questions or comments on accounts payable, item number 10. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to announcements.
I don't have any published announcements. I'll do my typical spiel, a lot of things going on, plays, activities, events, lots of things. Visit our website, look for budget communication in the future from us. It will be also an important announcement, just to cue in people to that.
And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
It was your turn to move, but okay.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thank you, Rich, for joining.